Right, so then we can restart the session. We were planning to have this panel discussion. However, now we have more questions coming in, so we would like to kind of still continue to the questions. And then I think I had to cut the answer from Pauline for the last question about how to develop integrated waste management value chain, and then how in a country like South Sudan using this approach. So maybe Paulina, if you are there, maybe if you could you continue your answer for this question? Is Pauline here? Maybe not. He's not yet back. Okay, so in that case, then I would like to go for another question for JFE. Mr. Maruhashi, do we have Mr. Maruhashi here? Great.
Yes, I'm here, yes.
Great. So we have two questions for three questions for JFE. Looking at the high technology for waste to energy plants, how feasible is it for setting up such facilities, especially in the least developed countries? I think it is a very good question. And this is also from Mr. Kobeli from Lesotho, sorry for my pronunciation. And is the WTE power plant a good solution for Harare city in Zimbabwe? Kuno from Munich. And then the third question, yes, that's it, two questions. So it's all about our financial feasibility in Africa. Also we lost the connection from Mr. Maruhashi as well.
Okay, thank you from question B.
Hello? Yeah.
Hello,
yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, one more time, just. Okay, so let me answer from a question from KT, first question. So I think finance is a challenge. However, the amount of waste is increasing day by day, even least developing countries as well. And it is certain that the tragic situation will come in the not too distant future. So in the reality, many people have already lost their lives due to the collapse of inappropriate landfill sites in various countries. So JFE believes waste to energy is a very best solution. And as you know, that the international cooperation organizations such as JICA and AFDB have various financial support programs. So you can also please visit them. So let's solve the problem together at an early stage. Okay, so second answer to KK. So an effective solution for any city in any country, I believe this WTE, because it will be most important facility for residents, and it is necessary to continue driving safely and securely for a long period of time. Therefore, we would like you to please access our company as it requires specialized constellations. So in that case, we would appreciate if you could provide us with the amount of waste in Harare City and other data. Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Maruhashi. I think that we have done a waste-wide cities to survey in Harare. So those data is already available. About 700 tons per day is generated. 27% is collected in Harare City because the fuel is very expensive and then can't really be purchased for running the vehicles to collect the waste. And then however, that in Harare City, it's a high home composting ratio. So the waste is a very, I would say, burnable rich, I would say. But however, that financial feasibility part should be really carefully looked at, especially when introducing the waste to energy plant. Otherwise, it can be also a big financial burden for the municipal governments as well. So we should look at it carefully for the suitability, especially in the context of African continent, I would say. Thank you very much. And Victor, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Great. So we have 3 questions for you. First one is, please kindly elaborate on the app, where to download the Givo apps. That's from Mr. Sonigitu Ikpe. Second one is, could you please the technology implementation done and the collection? This is from Mr. Efratus. And the third question is, what type of community do you engage in your project? And that's also from Efratus. And then actually, for the sake of a French translation, it would be great if you could talk a little bit slower for the interpreter, so that the French audiences also can follow up and then get the good information from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't hear I didn't hear the second question, but let me start with the first question, right? In terms of where to download the app, so we don't have the app on the Play Store yet. I mean, we might have it soon, but the thing is, because we work in communities, it's not necessarily for everybody. It's more for the people in the communities we're present in. Right. So yes, even though if the app is on the store, everybody can download it, but it's really about our users, and those people are the people in the communities we're present in. The other thing to also emphasize is that the customer app is just a view of the customer's transactions from the back end. The back end is the depository of information, right? And so those things are not easily shareable on the Play Store and Apple Store. Those are intellectual property, and that is the basis that even feeds the customer app itself. I hope I haven't confused you with that answer, but the summary is, we don't have the app open to the public or open on Play Store or Apple Store, because it's really for our customers in the communities that we are present in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Sonigitu, you are raising your hand. Please turn on your camera and then maybe feel free to ask more question if you have.
Okay.
Maybe Sonigitu, you should unmute yourself. Could you kindly unmute yourself? Or maybe we lost the connection.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry, there were 2 more questions, and I could try to quickly answer those.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so the next one was about technology implementation on collection. again, let me try to answer that to the best of my abilities. So yes, at the point of collection, the technology that we have implemented right now, again, the use of IoT. So IoT to digitize the collections, right? So that's the scale and an Android device to be able to tell us the weight of the collections, right? Of course, also, again, we use the IoT for registration. So every time we go to a new customer, we register them, and we also register their location. So in this case, there's the GPS, GPRS that gives us a location for where the collections are. So for every collection, we're able to have about 3 or 4 data sets. So we know where it was collected, again, GPS, GPRS, so we know the location, the individual that is depositing the material. So of course, we've done a registration for that person, a KYC, so we know that. And we also know the quantity of the material, right? So again, using IoT to determine the weight, right? So because there's a value for the weight, we also then know a value for the product, right? So value, quantity, location of depositor, and who the depositor is. Those are the 4 data sets we're able to collect reliably at the point of collection. But of course, along the value chain, we collect others. But specific answer, yeah, that's the answer to that question. The last question was, what type of community do we engage in our projects? This is a very good question, and I think for us, what we've tried to do is we're not focused on any communities in particular, right? So again, I think the data has shown that this recyclables problem, or this it's cut across, developing world, right? So whether be in Africa, be in Asia, wherever you are, right? Being in a commercial area, in a industrial area, in a residential area, right? This problem still exists. So for us, it's not necessarily about trying to find areas that have more of the problem or not. It's more about, in every 2-kilometer radius, right? Can we find enough materials to sustain a center? And the answer to that is 100% yes, based on the consumption patterns, on the increased consumption rates, and on the right now the recycling rate is less than 5% in most of these countries. And so yes, in every 2-kilometer radius, there is again 300 to 500 kilograms per day of recyclables that can be collected, regardless of whether it's a residential area, an industrial area, or a commercial area.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Super interesting that the technology is really helping the solid waste management in a very innovative way. So now I would like to invite all the panelists here. Now I think we addressed most of the questions, and then maybe I would like to invite all the speakers today to join here. Please turn on your camera so that everybody can really see your face. And then I also can continue getting the questions from the floor. However, if there's no much questions, then I can also move on to my question too. So yes, Francois is raising your hand. Do we have Daniel here? And
Yes.
then Mr. Maruhashi. Yeah, great. Maybe if you could turn on your camera. And then also, do we have Pauline here? Or we lost Pauline maybe. Okay, and then we have Mr. Maruhashi-san. Also, Maruhashi-san, could you turn on your camera so that everybody can see your face? And then also Daniel too. And then yes, hopefully I can get the Pauline here. No, not yet. Maybe let me see. So yes, Francois. Francois, please go ahead for your question if you have raised your hand.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible now.
Sorry, we are not hearing you very well. Maybe could you get closer to your microphone?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to go off the video so that the connection can be good. Anyway, I have a comment on what Daniel. I asked Mr. Daniel a question on plastic recycling, and his answer was perfect. It was a very good answer. But I would like to give a comment on that, because in our specific case, for example, in Bukavu here in DRC, there is a local organization that is recycling plastic waste, and we are trying to encourage, as I said yesterday, we are trying to encourage such initiatives to, I mean, many youth groups can be recycling waste. And specifically for plastic, in Bukavu, we have some avenues that we were trying, some roads that we are trying to pave. And we, as the city, we don't have enough money to tarmac them, you know. So we are trying to see if we can use the paving blocks so that we can modernize those avenues. And we thought, like, if we can encourage youth groups to recycle plastic waste, that can be a way of consuming the waste that we are generating on the daily basis. And instead of just collecting waste, dumping them, in terms of plastic, we can recycle, we get the paving blocks, and then we pave our roads, because the city doesn't have enough money to tarmac them, the normal tarmac, you know. So we are trying to use the blocks. I personally saw that in Nairobi. In Nairobi, with the current administration, they are trying to, of course, they are using the pedestrian areas. They are trying to use, or they are using plastic waste. They recycle the plastic, and then they get very nice blocks to pave the pedestrian side. So in Bukavu, we are also trying to see if we can get a very good skills, if we can get very good skills on that, because the paving blocks we are using or we are recycling in Bukavu is not very strong to be used for the avenues. That's why I was trying to request through this platform, if we can get an organization here experienced on that, they can assist us on how to get a very good quality on paving blocks, so that this youth organization can learn from them and come implement what we are trying to implement in Bukavu. Because that organization was given a tender by the municipality on producing recycling plastic waste, a way of consuming the plastic waste in Bukavu, and at the same time using the same products to pave our roads. So if we can have an organization here within us from any country, any city, that can assist us on how to get a very nice paving block, so that we can connect that organization with that city or that organization and help in terms of producing a very nice quality organization. I mean, paving block. Thank you very much. That's the comment I wanted to make.
Thank you, Francois. So this is a question for Daniel, I think. Daniel, are you there? Maybe do you have a little bit of reaction towards this? Maybe the local situation, according to the local situation, maybe different solutions can fit.
Could you make the question a bit more specific? Like, what is meant by local
basically solution? This is more like not a question, more like a comment. So the Francois was asking this question about like the applicability of the technology of plastic recycling, and then your comment was about the turning the good quality of plastic waste into the not so recyclable construction material is not so, like, preferable operation. However, that Francois was saying that
I get the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think my view is probably a bit controversial. I'm actually largely against small scale recycling. And so, you know, when people normally talk about locally adapted solutions, let's give a youth group some basic equipment and let them crush some plastics and make some fencing poles. I think that's not a good idea from an environmental point. Like, I'm speaking purely from an environmental point, because, you know, for us to maximize the value of waste and keep it in a circular loop for as long as possible. And I think we all need to face the reality that when we speak about circular anything, it's actually not circular, it's just less linear, right? We're still eventually disposing. So the goal is, how do we keep it as close to a circular loop as possible? And the more low-tech equipment you use, the more you downcycle it with poor washing facilities, poor crushers, poor melting into new products, the less you have of a life cycle. Now, obviously, I'm aware of the implication of what I'm saying. It does mean that, you know, equipment will become more expensive and it's more centralized with, you know, companies or people who can afford them. But again, this is not a social point, it's an environmental point. And so I think where I see it is, I see local groups and small scale people as suppliers. So there should be in the transport and pre-processing, which you can do with low-tech equipment, but the actual converting of, you know, into plastics, into a pellet, into a flake, into a new equipment should happen using fairly high-tech equipment. Now, I'm not saying multiple millions of dollar equipment, but neither am I saying $10,000 locally built plastic crusher. So I think, so in that sense, I see the local role of these small scale businesses in sourcing material, collecting it and pre-processing, but the actual conversion into A, pellets, and B, final products should happen at a fairly industrial scale, because that's the only way you can achieve the required qualities to keep plastic in the loop rather than leading to a downcycling process. So in that sense, if that hopefully does answer the question, often people suggest like, oh, let's get some small equipment to some youth group. I'm like, not for that from an environmental point of view. And then coming to the social point of view, in my experiences, those are often more romantic projects that look nice, and the machine and equipment will stop working within 3 months because either they've sold part of the parts, or maybe they don't have the ability and money to service the equipment. Now, I know that is controversial, but I guess that's why we have a panel.
Yeah.
So that's my point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, for this. It's very controversial, maybe, in considering that Africa is a challenge in terms of the unemployment rate. However, that I think the reality check is still should be there. Maybe, as you mentioned, that sometimes those small scale projects sometimes stopped after 3 years or something. So yeah, thank you very much for your contribution. I also got some contribution or comments from the Miss Samira Abidi. Thank you very much, Miss Samira. Also, she is the one who provided an opening remark from the Tunisia side. And this is, I would like to thank the speakers for the consistency of the presentation. And I think that the dilemma of waste management in African countries is the absence of an integrated waste management system. And there are isolated experiences of recovery and recycling with these incubator projects. For this reason, it is necessary to root the system and its institutional, financial, and technical levels according to the indicators to ensure structural change. Yes, I think this is something really related to the my question on the panel discussion I prepared. So what partnership between public, private, and citizens are needed for Africa to accelerate those circular businesses and then also contribute to the solid waste, improved solid waste management? Maybe I can ask this question to maybe Daniel. Daniel, do you have any comments or thoughts for this question? What kind of partnership is needed between public, private, and then citizens for these circular businesses and solid waste management businesses can flourish?
Okay, well, in the spirit of saying controversial things, a few points. I largely find citizen campaigns overrated. Why am I saying that? I think donors tend to like doing projects on waste source separation, and while I think they're super important, we also need to accept or be cognizant of the reality that in more developed countries that had significantly more funding, so just splashing a small amount of funding and trying to sustainably get people to source separate isn't going to work. One. Two, we have much lower labor costs across Africa, so we don't actually need source separation as much as we need it in the West or in more developed countries where subsequent source more expensive, capital intensive. Like here, we can. I want to preclude downsides from that statement, but we can run fairly low-tech sorting sites. Source separation hasn't happened. So in that sense, I think citizen engagement isn't actually that important. What is important is that the systems are there to service the citizens, because engaging them without a system doesn't make sense. So in the whole equation of where the focus should be on waste management, I think citizens are probably the least important part, because we can separate after the fact. And if we engage citizens, but there's no collection, sorting, and recycling infrastructure, then the engagement is also pointless, because what is it for if there's no subsequent value chain? So that to the first category of stakeholders you mentioned. Now, with regards to the public and private, the public and private sector, again, I mean, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I think what we are seeing is there is a reality where the public sector has often not the financial resources, and to some extent not the technical resources, but mostly not the financial resources. So Western models, Japanese models are built on the city taxes funding infrastructure, taxes funding licenses, taxes funding concessions. And often I see development partners, sorry to say that, including JICA, to try to emulate the same approach across Africa, but kind of ignoring the reality that the amount of public sector funding to make those approaches work, even if it's a grant from the Japanese government, as an example, there still needs to be funding available to run operations, which often then never works, right? So I think that reality that government is less capacitated financially and otherwise needs to be taken into account, which then as a result means the role of the private sector is much bigger and more operational than it would be in other more developed countries. And as a result, then the public role should be more on the regulations and the licensing. The other reality is, ideally, and that's again a bit difficult, right? If you look at tenders and you try to tender out concessions for collection with or without payment, then there's a risk of corrupt procurement, right? So I think we do need to look at other models where maybe it's an open market, but an open, heavily regulated market. So it's a market where people can compete, so that you don't run the risk of just getting a tender to a favored entity, but at the same time, it's a market that not everyone can operate with poor standards where waste is dumped left, right, center. So in that sense, I feel like there needs to be much more work on how the public sector regulates the private sector, but the overall focus should be on the private sector to be running operations of both collection and infrastructure. And then maybe there can be PPP concessions where donors fund infrastructure that then should be privately operated in some cases. So I think that's an option, but it shouldn't be a public operator. So those are a few thoughts on the topic.
I was muted. Thank you very much. I think it's very interesting to know that maybe the public sector can really play a role only for the regulations and not really the implementer or operator for the solid waste management. That's really interesting. I'd like to ask the same question maybe to Mr. Maruhashi. Based on your experience so far in developing a big waste to energy project, what do you think about the question and then also the comments from Daniel in terms of what kind of partnership can be really arranged between public, private, and also citizens partnership?
Okay, so thank you for asking me a question. So I think we all discharge waste every day. So proper waste disposal is an important public service. Unless the public sector, private sector residence. And everyone understand and cooperate, proper waste treatment will not be realized. So this is possible in Japan. So let's do the same things.
So you're saying that you believe that the Japanese model can be applied to the Africa, or?
Yes, yes, yes. We could be. I'm thinking that the Japanese model can be applied in Africa. So yes, let's do it as we are doing. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe Victor, do you have any thoughts on the partnership between public and private, and then also citizens? What kind of the partnership is needed for Africa to accelerate the circular businesses?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so I think I agree with what I mean, mostly what the previous speaker said. But I guess for me, I like to look at it in a different way, right? I think for different for everyone, individuals, right? We all have behavioral patterns, and we have our reasons for doing that, right? We have our motivations and reasons for doing certain things. Now, I think I read there was a report that was out sometime last year that estimated that municipalities did around 20% of their revenue on waste management services, right? And so, as Daniel rightly mentioned, yes, again, a lot of the way this is funded is through taxes, right, or through EPR schemes and so on and so forth. And those do not really exist in this part of the world. And how do you even track? And so for us, very early on, I think we understood that perhaps the opportunity, I mean, I'm going on a different tangent now, but the opportunity is actually in the data more than it is in the resources, right? Because so, I mean, in our case in point, for example, right, the data that we collect from a regulator point of view, right, is important for them, because otherwise they don't know in actual fact what the population consumption patterns are, right? They can estimate, they can guesstimate, but they don't have the ability and the resources, right, to be able to do it in a verifiable manner like a private sector individual like me would do, right? To achieve, and this is how we can help them achieve it. And so it's really about finding those synergies between, again, in this case, government. So providing them information, again, with the customers, with the depositors. What we do is we give them incentives, cash. We also give them, again, for some people, the data on carbon saved is actually more important, right? So for businesses, right, those are things that fit into their sustainability reports. So that is how you engage them, again, in the wider system. The other part is, I mean, again, I guess people on this call are aware of this thing called carbon credits, right? A lot of businesses in the West, the most popular, Tesla, make a lot of their revenue from this, or significant portion of their revenue from carbon credits, right? And these are things that are not out of reach. You know, these are things that can be done here, especially with the right technology. Rather, every economy, every government is finding new ways to generate revenue, right? A lot of governments have EPR schemes, extended producer responsibility schemes. A lot of governments have signed up to this new regulations, the COP27, all the different things that are out there, right? But there is an opportunity, especially in enforcement, because they don't have the ability to enforce those regulations. And so basically, I guess what I'm saying is, if we're able to find ways to partner and to find places where we can help governments, where again the individuals, the depositors can also be engaged because of what is benefiting them. Yes, that would really help the ecosystem and really allow the government maintain its role as a regulator. So yes, I also agree that the government should also be a regulator. But I think the role of data in all this, what I'm saying is really, really humongous, because a lot of different parts of the value chain gets benefits through the appropriate collection of data.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting point that maybe the collection of data, the data of the solid waste management globally, especially in Africa, is very poor. The reliable data for the solid waste management is very difficult to obtain. So that's really connected with our initiative of developing waste-wise cities too. And then that really also enabled us to really identify how much of the plastic is leaking from the solid waste management systems. And in considering, like, as you said, that of course that the method, this is really related to the methane pledge done by the more than 100 countries in COP26 last year in Glasgow. And then now that the carbon finance for the solid waste management is now being so like shed a light, especially on the potential for the reducing the methane emissions. So maybe yes, you're right, Victor. That's a very good point. I think for the data can be really the catalyst for unlocking the new financing mechanisms to flow into the waste management, especially in Africa. And then I'm a little bit of sharing my ideas. Is like the earlier this year, United Nations Environment Assembly 5.2 concluded with a resolution to set up legally binding global agreement on plastic pollution that probably also unlock new financing and then also regulations or demand for countries to set up a proper EPR scheme. So that we really have to seize the momentum, I think, so for this agreement to make the countries to have a mandatory EPR scheme for the plastics, and then that probably brings some new source of revenue for that, the solid waste management systems. So it's a very good point, I think. And then here, that's very also, I think it's very, very interesting point. It was mentioned by Daniel, and then also Victor, you, that the government's role should be licensing and regulations only, and then the foreign support for setting up an infrastructure can be done, but the operation should be done by the private sector. I think that's a very interesting uptake, I think, takeaway for today. This is a voice from the private sector. I think, yes, I can see the Mr. Maruhashi's hand is up. Please.
Yes, I think my answer is too general, and I thought my second idea. I don't know whether this is ideal or not, but my idea is for the government sector and the private sector will tie up at the beginning of like a master plan, and we both considered how to acquire land, and including environment impact assessment, and also consider consideration of a waste to energy plant. And also we could do this kind of tie-up, I guess, from a local area to set up a small waste to energy plant. And later, I believe that it would expand other areas. So I don't know whether this is reality or not, but this is what I thought. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very good contribution. Thank you. In the involvement of private sectors, stakeholders from the master planning stage or action planning stage or strategic planning stage is very important. I think that's a very good point. Daniel, you are raising your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, just a comment on waste to energy.
Mm-hmm.
I actually feel like waste to energy is one of the last things that should be considered in the African context for a variety of reasons. One, it's not green. It's not where we need to go environmentally as a planet and as a people. Two, if we look at the financials, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense for Africa. If we look at the average fees a waste to energy plant globally needs to operate, in the West, they're between $100 to $200 a ton. Even if you take low-tech Chinese or Indian technology, you're talking at least $30 to $50 a ton. If we now compare that to the average, fees paid today at most African dump sites or landfills, they're at about $1 to $2, right? So the financial incremental costs of being able to afford such systems are so high that basically no municipality can afford them. And if they did, the private sector wouldn't be willing to pay it. So the bill would need to be footed by the government, and then they would eventually have major municipal budget shortfalls over that. Further, third point is that the material we have in Africa has the wrong composition for waste to energy plants. Because income levels and as a result packaging amounts across Africa are much lower than in developed countries, we have a much higher percentage of organic waste, 50% to up to 80% depending on the municipality and the relative income levels. Now, organic waste doesn't burn. Therefore, the amount of treatment costs and pre-treatment costs to get the waste dry enough to get to a sufficient calorific value to even work in a waste to energy plant doesn't make sense. So taking all these things together, we as a planet need to become greener and more circular. Waste to energy is the opposite. Two, the financials is just too expensive for African municipalities to afford. And three, the waste is just too wet to burn, is the reason why we really shouldn't do waste to energy. And if you look at the last 20 years, I think there's been one waste to energy plant commissioned in Addis Ababa. And to the knowledge I have, that's been a complete disaster. It's not operating, and the municipality is caught in paying a Danish-Chinese consortium regular monthly fees for a plant that is operationally not operating. So, which just shows that this is not what we should be doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. I personally think that there are some countries and municipalities that cannot afford a waste to energy plants. And then there's some, for example, island countries and so on, for example, Seychelles and so on, could probably fit to the local status. However, that's a very good point. Thank you for mentioning, Daniel. I think that these things usually that the financial sustainability is the big issue for the waste to energy plant introduction, and then that the point should be well noted. And then to introduce the waste to energy plant, I think it's very important to have a good sustainable financial plan for the coming 10 or 20 years. Otherwise, that it can be stopped and it will be the financial burden. So yes, someone is raising a hand. I'm not so sure if that's a Veronica from UN Habitat or any other participants who is not really. Yes, please go ahead. We would like to wrap up in 2 minutes, so maybe please be concise. Victor, yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing regarding there was a previous comment on modular facilities for manufacturing, right? And Daniel mentioned something about yes, people really being enabled or facilitated for that initial part of collection and processing. It was something I wanted to really emphasize on. And yes, modular processing, unfortunately, or manufacturing is not quite efficient. And the other part that businesses seem to forget about is there's a huge marketing cost related to some of those things that is never really considered. I just wanted to emphasize that because we've also done some experiments in manufacturing in this space.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to close this session for today. So 4th day of ACCP assembly is now being done. I think today's takeaway is very interesting, a lot, especially from the point of view of the private sectors. And I think there's quite an interesting remark was there. The public sectors role in operating a little solid waste management should be contained for the licensing and also regulations, and then so that the private sectors can be also play a big role in there as well, because there's not so much of a tax base to support the operation itself. That's one interesting contribution and a suggestion from the participants today. And we also found the data is a very interesting key area that might be unlock the not unconventional financing. So that also really, I'm happy to hear that, because that is also resonating the monitoring framework of SDGs. We have a monitoring methodology of SDG indicator 11.6.1, which can provide the essential data for the solid waste management planning at the city level. And then if that is done, scaled up for the different cities, then it also helps at the country level solid waste management strategy as well. So those are the lessons learned, and then also the reality checks and then lessons learned from the reality of the really operating a day-to-day business is really shared, and I think that was a very interesting. And so tomorrow, the first 1 hour will be a closed session to finalize the outcome document of this Assembly Tunis Action Guidance. And then both English and French version are already shared on the website. Maybe I will share this again. So here. And you can see from here that the Tunis Action Guidance in English, draft 1 here, and then also the French version. French version is downloadable here. So please have a look at it and then think about it, all the wording, and then try to incorporate your demand or commitments for as an ACCP members and in there, and then suggest your feedback in the first 1 hour for tomorrow's session. And then also ACCP Secretariat has already sent a different link to ACC only for that. This is only for the ACCP member countries and cities via email. So please check again in your email inbox and then make sure you can join the session. And then also I would like to remind you again of the business matching website in this link here, here. And then please make a visit and interact with various waste, solid waste management solution providers here coming from different parts of Africa and also Japan. So today I would like to thank you all the participants again, and also thank you very much for all the contribution from the speakers. And then I very much looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And yes, feel free to also contact ACCP at un.org if you have any questions or any comments on ACCP Assembly organizations. Oh, yes, and then I have to also, yes, I forgot this one. So please, everybody turn on your camera, and so that we can have a nice picture, group picture for this occasion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your participation and also contributions for the past 4 days. So shall we do? I'm not so sure. I'm on spotlight at the moment. Okay, great. So we can, shall we say 3, 2, 1? Veronica, please, can you tell me when is the good timing?
You can go ahead now.
Okay, great. Great, thank you. So 3, 2, 1, smile. Thank you. And another one, 3, 2, 1, smile. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's session too.
Yeah.
And then, great. Thank you so much. So in the meantime, say goodbye and see you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice time.
Bye.
Bye. Meet you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Thank you.